Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Forward Talks, a podcast hosted by Forward Inc. We are an organization that supports newcomer entrepreneurs in starting their own business. And today I have brought a really special guest again. For the first time, we are interviewing one of our board members. So today I have Alexander here. He is on the board of Forward Inc. and he is also an investor and has invested in our startups in the past. Hello, Alexander. Maybe let's kick it off by giving you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you so much for having me in this special podcast of Forward Talks. I'm a board member of Forward slightly more than a year, and I'm very proud to be part of your organization. I have been involved in Forward Inc. since before its inception, I would say. I met Diederik before he first got his money to run the first cohort, I would say 4 years ago. So I've been involved for a very long time, for as long as possible, Forward Inc. But more importantly, I'm also an investor. I created an organization called White Horse Investment, where I invest in newcomers, and I started also about 4 years ago doing that after a career of 25 years in fossil fuels industry, I should say, which 5-6 years ago I decided to quit and then refocus my life on this activity.
So you guys can already see we have a very cool twofold guest here as an investor, but also as a board member. So you already told us right now a little bit about how you first met Diederik, how you first got involved. But what exactly motivated you to take on a board position at Forward Inc.?
Yeah, and Leah, with the risk of becoming a bit too long story, I will still start with the very beginning. So about 5 years ago, I moved back to Holland and left Shell at the same time. And I decided to do something completely differently. I quickly came in touch with newcomers, but I also was in a way a newcomer myself because I'd been abroad for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I must admit, returning to Holland after 20 years was both culturally and administratively quite hard for us. 5 years ago also happened to be the time when the big wave of immigrants was probably at its peak.
Yeah.
And I realized very quickly that if it was difficult for me, being a fluent Dutch speaker, highly educated, knowing the system and having a social network, how extremely much more difficult it would be for the newcomers that were coming in at that time. So I decided I wanted to do more to help. And initially I just did what probably many people do. I became a taalcoach at Vluchtelingenwerk, and then I fairly rapidly expanded into becoming a volunteer for 2 days a week at Vluchtelingenwerk. And fairly soon I realized that the big issue for newcomers is finding a job. Initially I started out with a friend of mine to try to work with companies and find jobs and place newcomers in these jobs. That didn't work out very well. I think we were too early in the wave of newcomers, so many didn't speak well enough Dutch, but also I have to admit there were issues of, I would say, xenophobia in some of the companies.
Okay.
There were cultural differences, so that didn't work out very well. We had quite some success dealing with CEOs, but once we started to try and implement it, it didn't work out very well.
Okay, I see.
And then I realized, well, I have a financial background, I know business. Many of our newcomers actually were entrepreneurs in their home country, which is there probably a lot more common than in Holland. So why not bring all that together? I want to help them. They need money to invest. They need advice to invest. So I created White Horse Investment. And with White Horse Investment, as I always say, we do 3 things: advice, bring network, and invest. When, of course, then I started to talk with people, I met people like Diederik and Laura, who were creating Forward Incubator of Refugees Forward back at the time. And there were at the time a few others who were trying to do something else. So something similar, something very similar. Ironically though, Forward Incubator is still there. The others have more or less left the field, which what isn't a surprise in hindsight, because the energy that Diederik and Laura had was amazing. How they pulled it off, I was extremely sure that they would do a great job in helping newcomer entrepreneurs be successful in their business. So initially my involvement was just to go to the days. I even did a guest lecture for one of their courses. And as time grew by, I did probably by now 4 or 5 investments in alumni of Forward. Then a year and a half ago, after some changes in the board in Forward, they asked me to join the board, and I didn't have to think very long. I was very pleased to do that. And currently my focus in the board is, I'm a general board member, so I help thinking about the future of the organization, but I also have a specific interest still in the financial dealings of the organization.
Exactly right. Okay, so you already went a little bit into also your investment firm Whitehorse, and a little bit also the reason why you want to support newcomer entrepreneurs. And I think it really goes to show that the energy that Laura and Diederik bring, I think at some point we should also have them on the podcast, really also are at the centerpiece of our community and bring people together. What is the board position at Forward like? So how do you deal with challenges when it comes to the board position, but also facing the fact that you are not in daily contact with our participants? How do you think you have an impact on them still?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we have a very dynamic board. I think we really have, with Martina, Reinier and Jasmin and myself, really a uniquely diverse board.
Absolutely.
But also a good mix of, I would say, Marina and I being a bit older, having more experience, I should say, and then Reinier and Jasmin being more or less young people in, I wouldn't say quite the same age range as Diederik and Laura, but certainly more...
The bridge between.
Yeah, the bridge between. I think I see my task in a few ways. So firstly, I am the penningmeester, so I'm accountable for helping the financial situation. I must say Diederik and Laura do an extremely good job, so that doesn't require much, but I do keep a very close eye on the finances of Forward to make sure that not only this year will be managed, but that the organization has a future for many years to come, so that we don't overdo it now at the expense of future possibilities. So that's very practical involvement. I think we also think about more strategic issues at the board as a group. For example, we're now looking, of course, at expanding abroad, and we've had several conversations where to start, how to start, what the aim should be, and not just at the pragmatic level, but also slightly more, okay, how can the organization cope with that? How do we grow the organization? How do we make sure that people don't get overworked? Brings me to another issue, because we look at, of course, the organization. I speak to people individually from time to time, and I get a sense that people work incredibly hard, probably harder than is sustainable in the long term. So we also try to discuss with Diederik and Laura, okay, what can we do to make sure that people don't get overworked, that there are no burnouts in the end, and that sort of things. And of course there it helps, having been a manager of big teams myself, and Jasmin being a human resources person, we all bring our own expertise, and of course then it's to Laura and Diederik to take all the different advice we give and choose what they use. Of course in the end it's up to them to implement it, but we try and help them with sometimes fatherly advice, and sometimes strategic advice, and sometimes just thinking, brainstorming with them, having somebody outside the organization look into it.
Absolutely. And I think for the two of them, that is a really big help, because in day-to-day activities, the two of them, and they also always say that to the team, they always call it being involved in the nitty-gritty of the daily activities. I think if you are just in this little hamster wheel, it's sometimes hard to have a bigger, a holistic view or look into the future. And I think having you guys as the board really balances what they can do day to day, but also considering what has to happen in the future.
I think your analogy of the hamster wheel is very accurate. Because sometimes it feels like when observing Diederik and Laura that they are running very, very fast in the hamster wheel. And I think the couple of hours a month we spend with the board and them are a good moment for them to reflect. And in the preparation, I think it's also already a good moment to reflect. So I hope that in itself helps. And then with respect to your question around how does it benefit the individual participants, of course there, I think my main help is firstly helping the organization, but also as an investor. With the Corona times, it's been a bit less, but before, I think I met with almost every single participant one-on-one at some point in time in the process to have a 15-minute, 20-minute pitch and then some feedback. I am quite good at that. I'm always open to do that because I really enjoy listening to enthusiastic entrepreneurs. But I'm also quite brutal if I think there are holes in the plan, if it's lacking certain substance. I will give that feedback and I will say, you really need to work on this because no investor will say yes to this like this. And I don't think I have, I'm always right, but I think 95% of the cases when I make these comments, it really helps people focus their efforts in the next, for the next round.
And it really goes to show what we always try to embrace here at Forward, soft on the people, hard on the business. Because I also think, at the end of the day, you're not doing anyone a favor by being really soft. Sometimes you just have to put the hard facts out there and changes need to be made. But I think it really does help people if you're stricter and clearer from the beginning onwards, then having somebody carry on with illusions that are just not going to become reality.
Yeah, agree.
But that also brings me to a little bit of the second half of this interview. So your role as an investor, you have invested also in Forward startups in the past, most recently into Varut, who is now running an Ecoplaza franchise. And you explained a little bit earlier on what motivates you to be a social investor focused on people with a refugee background. But I also wanted to, besides this motivation, know from you a little bit, how do you scout people to invest in? And what are some of the criteria that you look at? What are the criteria that startups have to fulfill?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about that, but let me first stop for 1 second at Varut, because you asked me about my motivation.
Yeah.
But there is no better motivation than being with an entrepreneur. 2 weeks ago, I actually went to Os, where the Ecoplaza that Varut and her husband, I think, and brother are running right now, and I was so impressed. I mean, I really saw a place that looked clean. There were customers. The produce looked good. The products were all very well stalled out. It was really, you could see it was a shop that was managed with love and care by an enthusiastic team that still has a lot to learn because they literally took it over a few months ago, but they are doing very well in a difficult time just post-Corona. But I know they will do well, and I know they will have a great success. There is no greater motivation than seeing that happen.
Yeah.
And right now, I think I've done close to 40 investments with Whitehorse Investment.
Okay.
I would say 30 are doing really well. There are a couple struggling and a couple really struggling, partially due to Corona. But it's so satisfying to see that anyone that does well, that creates a place for himself in life, that is just great motivation. And to be clear, if you're in Holland and you don't have a job, you probably have very low self-esteem. You don't integrate very well. You can't participate in social activities. and you feel a beggar holding up your hand to the municipal council for the uitkering. And if you can start your own business, your life is lifted up. You can you can become financially independent. Suddenly you are at social activities. You can talk about your business rather than about all the problems you've had in the past. And you have a future for yourself, and probably in many cases also, more importantly, for the children that you've brought in as well. So that's a great thing to be able to contribute to. So I scout them through various ways. So working together with Forward is obviously one, but I also work together with some of the municipalities. I work together with Vluchtelingenwerk, and also, quite funnily, I have a few Arab-speaking accountants who are often the first port of call for people who want to start their business, and they know how to find me if they think there are viable business plans. So that's another slightly unexpected angle for myself. I hadn't thought about this 4 years ago when I started, but it so happened, and it actually does work really well. And then, of course, there is word of mouth. Initially, that was barely there, but now people know other people that know me, and then they come to me, and I never say no to a first engagement. And sometimes they say, Guy, you're not the right person to do this. Sometimes I say you need to learn more, so go to Forward. And sometimes I invest. And then in terms of criteria, so Whitehorse, I have a fairly simple philosophy. I don't charge much. I charge some interest, depending a little bit on the risk profile, but it's never a lot, and I don't take shares. So my upside is pretty limited, which also means that my downside has to be pretty limited.
Yeah.
So I focus typically on what I say are proven product market combinations, where the new part is the actual entrepreneur. So, for example, I know that if you sell falafel in the Pijp in Amsterdam, you can make money. So then the only question I have to ask myself, is this the right location? Does he pay the right price for it? And is the guy or lady the right person to do it?
Yeah.
Because I already know the business model works. And that is, for me, it's really important to do it like that, because that keeps the downside low, as the upside is also pretty low. So that's one of the main criteria. But also, of course, then I look at what sort of entrepreneur am I seeing here. In Holland we say, when it comes to investment, het gaat over de vent, niet over the tent. And in English I translated that it's about the man, not the plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this sounds very sexist but it doesn't rhyme with lady.
We include the women entrepreneurs as well here, but for the rhyme.
Yeah, for the rhyme, it has to be man. But it is really important. I mean, and when I talk to people, I try to figure out what energy do they bring, how much motivation do they have, what is the motivation. Honestly, I also look at what social infrastructure do they have. A person alone is a risk, because if he gets sick, there's no one else. If it's a husband and wife, there's already two. So if one can't stand in the shop, the other can. If it's a woman alone, their children, no social network. I know that if the children get sick, it's difficult. And I have to keep that into account. And then I'd say, well, maybe it's better for you right now in your stage of life, find a job, rather than try and create your own business. Because for your own business, you need to be available for at least 60 hours a week, I'd say.
Yeah.
And that is not always easy to combine. So I look at the energy, most importantly, I look at the motivation, but I also look at what is the social situation of a person. And Behoed is a great example. She runs the Eco Plaza in Os together with her husband and her brothers. And then, of course, I do look a little bit at the plan, of course. I look at, okay, is there a way to make enough money to pay me back and make a living? I look at the competition around. So, for example, I'm not very keen on investing in hairdressers. I've had a lot of people who want to become a hairdresser, but in Holland there is just too many of hairdressers. The price for a haircut in Amsterdam has dropped by €5 on the cheap end in the past 6-7 years, and that is because so many people want to become a hairdresser. So I tell people, you can try, but not on my watch, or not with my money. Try and go to work for an existing hairdresser and don't invest in your own shop, because there are already so many. So that's some of the criteria I look at.
Yeah.
And then of course I want people to know about the tax side of what they're doing, the legal side of what they're doing, and particularly if you start working with food, you have to comply with all sorts of regulation. Have people thought about it? Do they know about it? You don't need to be an expert, but you need to be aware of what you need to know, what you need to do, and if you don't know, you need to be aware of who to call when you don't.
Yeah. But as a big takeaway, so one of the biggest things is really the entrepreneurial mindset and also having a support structure in place. It reminds me of an entrepreneur I'm currently working with because he has a great idea, and I also introduced him to an angel investor in our network, and he also himself independently found a woman who said, I'm willing to put up the investment, but only if you find a co-founder first.
Yeah.
And the both of them said that because he is really busy, he has 10 children, and it's a lot on his plate. And they said it's a big undertaking. So first we want to make sure that there's somebody who has your back, somebody who you can bounce ideas off of. Because of course what you also see in our programs is that sometimes midway through the incubator, people realize that is going to be a lot more work, because having your own business essentially will take up more time than having a 35-40 hour job.
Definitely.
That you can hold down. You know, that's also something that people learn and realize through our programs is entrepreneurship really the way for you? And also, you know, maybe there is a lot of competition out there. So I think your input can really greatly benefit somebody there.
Well, and for example, again with childcare, if you've got 10 children, that sounds like a lot, then the chances that one of them doesn't feel well in the morning is pretty high, I'd imagine.
It's pretty high.
And then what do? Do you stop your business for the day, or do you bring them to a grandfather? But typically, you might not have your grandfather living here. So the challenges are very, very big in that sense. So you need to be able to really focus on starting your new business.
Yeah. All right. I also wanted to ask about some of the challenges that arise with investing in refugee entrepreneurs. And I also wanted to ask a little bit of a bold question, which is, have you ever invested in somebody and regretted the decision afterwards?
Yeah. So let me start with the challenges. So I think the challenges are, there's the obvious ones that you would expect, right? There is language issues, there's cultural issues, and the Dutch tax system is difficult, but you can learn most of that. But I think one of the challenges that are very specific to newcomers are around the social network you have, and then I don't mean the friends you have, but for example, a typical Dutch person of 35 that wants to start a business has parents, has a wife with parents, so if the children get sick, they bring them to the parents. And that helps them, that strengthens their ability to focus on particularly their new business. But of course, if your parents live back in Syria, then that's difficult. So you have to be more self-reliant. It's actually even on the contrary, because often I see people that lose focus because the parent in Syria gets sick. They get very worried. They can't do much, but it distracts them terribly from the business, which it would me too. I mean, I can fully understand.
Yeah.
And also, I see people that suddenly, lots of our newcomers are traumatized in some way because of what they left behind, what they saw when they were there, or because of the actual flight, of the actual escape itself. And maybe the trauma is not visible in the first moment, but often that trauma starts to play up a couple of years later, which again can be a major distraction. So I think that is something I would probably not say no to somebody where I feel that, but I might say, maybe guy, get that all in your head together first, and then once your head is clear again, we focus on the business. But I see that as a particular set of challenges that our newcomers have, that I would say most people that have a Western European background and that are based in the Netherlands don't have, because they don't have that terrible story that they left behind.
Yeah.
So that is I think some of the key challenges that I see on top of the challenge of being an entrepreneur, which is already for anybody a challenge.
Absolutely, yeah.
The regret you were asking about, yes, I had one regret, very obvious regret, an investment I made into somebody who I think was a very clever, smart guy, quick. I think he knew how to make money. Unfortunately, he also realized that there are even quicker ways to make money, and got involved into some drug business, I imagine. I'm not 100% sure, but clearly had to leave the country suddenly. I don't know exactly where he went, but I suspect it was Turkey, because sometimes I got a phone call from Turkey from him, and he never paid me back any money, and I don't think I'll ever see him again. So bad luck, could happen to anybody. Fortunately, with a bit of interest I make on the investments, I can lose about 1 in 10. So far, so good. Honestly, if a business fails for reasons that are beyond control, I would never regret it, because that's part of life. If somebody's worked hard, if there is some bad luck happening. I yesterday went to a shop in Amsterdam that had been flooded twice in half a year.
Okay.
Literally about half a foot of water was there, and they had and all the fridges had broken down, so they had to twice replace all the produce they had, costing them 5,000 euros a piece. And then I'm like, yeah, that's bad luck. I mean, and then I make a payment agreement, and we come to a solution. So I wouldn't regret that. I mean, that happens to if you have a portfolio of nearly 40 investments, there will be some that have bad luck.
Absolutely.
And if I see the motivation is still there, I don't feel any regrets.
That's good. I guess that's also a little bit the life of an investor. Some you win, some you lose some.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. I want to finish off this interview with your number one advice for our entrepreneurs from an investor's point of view.
Yeah, but you had one question that I still want to answer.
Okay.
Which is the biggest success I had.
Yes, your biggest. Yes.
Because you asked me about the
one you regretted.
But I've got several great successes. I mean, as I said before, every person that becomes financially independent through entrepreneurship, where I've contributed to, I feel proud of and I'm happy with. But my very first investment I'm particularly pleased with, because of course what I'm looking for is helping individuals, but it's even better if there's a bit of a snowball. So one guy now has, for example, a beauty salon, but now he's got 3 with 12 people working there. But I invested only in the first. But the one I'm proudest of is the first one I did. He is now one of Amazon's principal transporters in Holland. He's got 40 people working for him. Oh, he's got 40 vans, so probably more people, I don't quite know, probably more like 60 to keep them all on the road all the time. Okay. All Syrian, and that's a great way where not only with one small investment, now 60 people are having a job working for a large company in Holland, and I'm very proud of that. I mean,
that is a true success story.
That is a success story that I really am proud of, and happy to see that you can help one, but then actually help a lot more through that.
Yeah. And coming back to your biggest advice for our entrepreneurs.
I think it is, be sure you can focus on what you want to do, and once you are sure about that, put all your energy and focus and drive to achieve that. It's more about that than getting the perfect plan or the best idea. It's really about the ability to focus. And secondly, probably look for advice and network wherever you can. Don't take any advice for granted, but if you get advice, but if you can, seek for advice from people that know the business and that can help you further.
All right. Guys, we come back to it in this podcast a lot, but Alexander confirmed it yet again. It's the entrepreneurial mindset that at the end of the day counts. I want to thank Alexander a lot for being on this podcast today.
Thank you very much, Leah, and thank you for having me, and good luck to all.
Goodbye from Forward Talks.